Question for you. One of the key things that we've heard time and time again on the campaign trail is this issue of education being paramount to voters in the Commonwealth. And time again, we keep coming back to this question of critical race theory. How much of a role has that played in this election thus far in terms of turnout, in terms of enthusiasm?
Well, I think it's a major deal. I'm literally on the eve of going now to the International Association for Ethnic Studies conference being held in Ohio tomorrow throughout this entire weekend, where we have been fighting for decades, since 1972, to ensure that the education and the experiences and knowledge and contributions of all persons, not just those of European descent, are part of our curriculum, particularly in higher education, particularly in public institutions, and particularly more recently in high schools. And we're seeing this trend throughout the country. We've seen not only here in the District of Columbia, where the State Board of Education is moving forward and advancing their social studies standards. We've seen it in New Jersey. We've seen it in Oregon, California, Indiana, so many states where they have pushed this even before the critical race theory hyperbole. And that's exactly what it is, because the challenge here for the Democrats is to move from the local school politics stories of local school boards being taken over by parents and neighbors who don't even have kids in the schools, who are picking up talking points from certain channels that they watch about what they think is happening in public schools. I can guarantee you that no public school in the Commonwealth of Virginia is teaching critical race theory. It's a legal concept. It's a project. And by the way, just for the viewers, it's not really even a theory. It simply is an idea that states that the law cannot be viewed as if race is neutral. And I think anyone who is paying a common sense attention to how the law has been used over hundreds of years, whether you're a woman or an immigrant, or you're a Polish, or you're Irish, or you're Black, or LGBTQ plus, or you're disabled, you know for a fact the law has been used against you often from time to time. And that's exactly what critical race theory talks about.
It's so fascinating because people are hanging their votes on this issue of critical race theory. But when you ask them, what is it? What is your understanding of it? They cannot fully articulate what it is. The GOP has used this narrative as a real divisive thing, almost a scary thing, to say that, you know, we're going to make one person feel bad about history while absolving the other person of what happened. How did this garner the kind of energy and oxygen that it did to really take off in the way that it has, such that not just in Virginia, we're talking about states across the country are viewing this as a horrible thing?
Yes, well, social media, certainly allows things to snowball faster than ever before in today's society, and that's exactly what has happened here. That's what happened with the racist references that are anti-Biden, about Dear, Brandon, etc. All these things are proliferating on social media, and the challenge there is that people are saying that they disagree and don't like something that they know nothing about, as you just articulated, and that's really dangerous. I mean, ultimately, what our democracy depends on is that citizens are voting with information because they have been duly and objectively informed, and then can go to the polls and make a decision that's best for them and their families and their interests. And unfortunately, what the Republican Party has chosen to do is instead to fan the flames of racism in the very Commonwealth where Black folks arrived first, and over 400 years ago, where the idea of racism being codified into law began in that very Commonwealth. The experience that we had over the last couple of years with honoring Juneteenth and commemorating 400 years of slavery in the 1619 Project certainly has riled Republicans, because they do not want our public schools to teach the horrible history of our country that has resulted in us being the rich, prosperous democracy of the world that we are. But that was built on the backs of a whole bunch of people who have been marginalized, including, by the way, anybody who was white and male who did not own property and who was not English. So this is not just something that was a country that was founded on the backs of people who did not participate fully in the system. This is a challenge that we have seen time and time again, election after election, where Republicans have sought to not educate, not inform about what their new policies may be, but have been very effective at the state and local level at using these wedge issues, whether it be race in Virginia, whether it be abortion in Texas, or something else somewhere else. These wedge issues are extremely effective at bringing out the bread and butter base of the Republican Party that is, in fact, those 30% Trumpers who will support anything that Republicans do, even those things that are, of course, against the majority interests of Americans as a whole.
So, Dr. Perry, looking at your crystal ball here, if you had to look to midterms, even the presidential race, would you say that what we are seeing here now in the Commonwealth, is that giving Republicans a pathway to success moving forward?
I'm teaching research methods right now at Howard on the Hilltop, and there's no relationship between correlation and causality necessarily. Is it going to be something that's going to be a talking point regardless of what happens with this race? Absolutely. Is there usually something that you can draw from an election an entire year ahead of time into what happens the following year? Not necessarily. Look exactly how we're reporting right now, how the winds of change have happened in Virginia vis-a-vis what happened just a year ago when Biden was on the ballot in the Commonwealth. And so we know that in a year, a lot can change. And Democrats can perhaps get a lot of their bills passed at a national level that will help down ballot races at the state and local level between now and then. And that might, in fact, change the tide. But to be clear, this race is not over in Virginia. It certainly is closer than what it arguably should have been, given the demographic change that's been led by Black women primarily throughout the Commonwealth over the last several election cycles in Virginia. But it does show that Republican enthusiasm is high, but it does not show that Democrats are out of the game yet. But regardless, it is fair to say that Republicans are having a reason and a fair reason to celebrate early tonight, because the enthusiasm's on their side. Their voters are the ones that seem to have come out, and we're waiting to see how those big cities are going to turn up in the Commonwealth. And it's going to be a long night, though.
Dr. Perry, last question for you before we've got to take a quick break here. You know, one of the things that you observed in this process is that some of Youngkin's ads said candidate for governor and not Republican candidate for governor. There's been a lot of talk about how Youngkin has put a whole lot of space between himself and the former president. And he sort of did this delicate dance. It appears to have worked in some ways in terms of enthusiasm.
It absolutely has worked. I mean, I'm an expert on state and local politics primarily, and what we know is that it's the bread and butter everyday issues that people care about. And what the McAuliffe campaign sought to do was to nationalize this race, to bring in all the big Whig surrogates of the Democratic Party and to liken Youngkin to Trump. The problem is Youngkin's personality in of itself isn't even like Trump's. He's not bombastic, he's not dramatic, he's not loud, he's not using a whole bunch of colloquialisms. He is someone who has been very measured, has been using his talking points consistently, has been speaking for himself, not having other people speak for him, and has been focused on those issues that matter to people in local and state races, like crime, like education. And those are the kinds of things that turn out voters in these off-year elections. And if Youngkin wins, it's going to be a clear referendum on the Democrat strategy to try to nationalize local and state elections.
All right, Dr. Ravi Perry, always great to talk to you, chair of the Political Science Department at Howard University. We know you'll be watching the twists and turns tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.